Meditation does really just help resolve problems and unlock latent conviction that we might have within ourselves. At the very least, it gives us time to be with ourselves, think for ourselves, and figure out what it is that we truly want, and then articulate it to ourselves deep down in such a way that it becomes conviction. I don't know of any other pathway to confidence than thinking for yourself, and I've been thinking for myself as long as I've been thinking. That's also the definition of flow, when you do something at the edge of your ability, too hard and it's frustrating, too easy and you're not learning anything or having fun. So it's a definition of fun, it's a definition of flow, and it's the place for optimal learning. You have to be your own judge. All the great artists, chefs, creators, musicians, I think also have great taste. If you read Schopenhauer, for example, he knew that he was the smartest man alive at that time in his region, and that nobody else would ever fully understand or appreciate him. But he made peace with that because he knew that his work would be remembered long after he was gone. So I do think there is an internal self-confidence that can arise from your own judgment and taste, and sometimes that is enough.
I feel like our confidence is, rooted in our childhood often. It really only takes one person to encourage or believe in or allow you to have an opportunity where you're successful for you to start building that internal confidence. In the same regard, it really only takes one person to be negative or, critical to destroy confidence. I think once we become adults, if we haven't had those experiences of acceptance and being proud of ourselves and of our work, then it can be difficult to be confident in other areas. But I do think even as an adult, you can still have opportunities and experiences that allow you to grow that. And I see it often. And I don't necessarily mean like the ugly duckling type thing, but I mean, that's a good example too, right? So I think the best thing that we can do as parents for young people, as mentioned earlier, are find meaningful opportunities for them to be successful and make it things that they actually had to work at, something that didn't come easy, so that they understand the connection between persistence, or given talent and success, and that sort of grows your confidence. I'm sure I'm missing other factors. Manisha, you asked a great question about decentralization, if you think that's the future. I do believe the further we go along in the 21st century, in a few more generations, when we have generations of people that have grown up in Web 3.0 tools, that this idea of decentralization becomes more popular and more common. I think as of right now, there's still so many other pieces that play a part. I was saying there's so many other pieces that play a part and a factor in families' decision to homeschool and what education looks like. And I think we're still, as a society, very much still tied, unfortunately, to the traditional models. I think that's rapidly shifting. And I think that people are making great waves. I like to think that I'm making great waves with my community and folks like Sharon and others here with micro schools and online schools. But at the same time, I have to realize that I have a certain advantage. The fact that I can be on my smartphone right now, even participating in this Airchat, when there are families that I know that still don't even have Wi-Fi. And so, those things make it extremely difficult to even introduce ideas of decentralized education to families where this is not their priority, because there's so many other needs that still need to be met. But I do believe all families prioritize their children.
That's so interesting, Naval. First of all, it's a great definition, but it also makes me think of the Prodigy Game digital learning app. The CEO, Rohan Mahimkar, based the game on Pokemon, and it seems like a very simple game, but the math problems are actually adapting to what a child is capable of. And what they do is they try to keep the child in what they call the zone of proximal development. So the questions are not too hard and not too easy. And that's what keeps the game fun. adaptive learning apps are really hard to build, and Prodigy Game is one of the only ones that I've seen successful. And it's precisely this concept you're talking about of being at the edge of your ability, but not too far, that makes the game fun for kids. And it also makes me think of Angela Duckworth and grit, and how having that ability to meet your frustration and push past it is a critical element of success, and something that we can cultivate in our children through homeschooling. Cultivate might not be the best word, because children are born with this natural inclination to push past frustration. That's how they learn how to walk. That's how they learn how to communicate with their parents, by having that grit. But sometimes it can get lost in traditional schooling or traditional parenting environments. And homeschooling, if done well, is an environment where we can keep the grit alive if we pay attention to it and gently encourage children to push past frustration, but not push them too hard. And then, of course, at the same time, we give them lots and lots of space for self-directed learning. We trust them that they can succeed without our help. And that's how they learn how to meet their goals and to embrace the frustration. That's an inevitable part of growth. One thing I've observed in my 20 years of teaching and working with hundreds of homeschooling families is that when you help a child too much, it can send them a subtle message that they're not capable of doing it themselves, which can be really detrimental to their learning. Esther Wachowski, who wrote How to Raise Successful People and raised Susan, the former CEO of YouTube, Janet, who's a Fulbright-winning anthropologist, professor, and researcher and pediatrician, and co-founder of 23andMe, and most famously, Elon Musk, said that she thinks the biggest mistake parents can make is helicopter parenting. And I do see, well, I don't necessarily think Elon is a model of a perfect human being. She is in large part correct. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen parents make is not allowing their children the space for proximal development by jumping in and helping them answer a question too soon, or just really pushing them too hard academically. And it doesn't give them that really vital space to fail, to develop grit. They're not trusting them that they will work through their frustration to achieve their goal, to learn the thing that they're curious about. Often in our online tutoring sessions, I will see really well-intentioned parents jump in almost immediately after the tutor has asked a child a question and say, oh, you know this, think about this or think about that. There's a really strong level of discomfort watching their child just be silent and squirm and think. And sometimes the child will come up with the answer a day later, and that's wonderful. They've had a whole day of developing problem-solving skills. So that's just something to watch as a parent. It's not bad or good. It's just kind of how we're conditioned through our own education system to jump in and help too soon. Just remember, everyone can learn anything. Everyone can master any skill if they're given enough time, if they're allowed the freedom to move at their own pace. So allow yourself that pace. Allow your child that pace. And if you're thinking about homeschooling, but you're scared to do it because of pressure from friends or family or images you have of homeschoolers that might be negative, give it a try. Set some goals of what you want to achieve academically and socially, and try it for a little while and see if you're moving closer towards those goals than you were in the other educational environment you were thinking of trying. And that's how you can build confidence. And this is precisely why self-directed education fosters confidence in children. I used to work as a high-end tutor on the Upper East Side, and my job was somewhat specific because I was trying to help children excel in school or on standardized tests. So it was different than teaching them something from scratch with my own curriculum. However, what I found really worked was personalizing education. So trying to figure out, what made children excited. If they were learning vocab and they were 14-year-old boys, sometimes I would make fart jokes. It could be as simple as that. Or, if a child was really good at math and they were learning French, we would talk about verb conjugation, like formulas. So that's just something you can do one-on-one, and through trial and error, you see what makes a child tick and how they learn well. What's great about being a parent is that there's a strong possibility that the way your child learns is the same way that you learn and your partner learns. So you can often fall back on what kind of learning strategies work for you, whether that's visual, auditory, project-based, and there's a strong likelihood that your child will learn the same way, or you might be observing your child and see that they learn quite differently from you and respond well to different activities, and then you can customize learning based on that. I am sure that most parents naturally applied teaching strategies when they were teaching their child how to go to the toilet, and they didn't think for once that they weren't a certified toilet trainer, and so they couldn't do it. They just picked up books about toilet training, or if their child responded well to stickers, they did that. Or if the child responded well to, I want to learn how to use the toilet like mommy, then they capitalized on that tool. Or some children just learned on their own by watching, So, in that scenario, parents don't hesitate to read up on the topic. And the same is true for learning math. If you are interested in learning more about helicopter parenting as a parent or as an educator, there's a fantastic talk that Julie Lythcott-Hames did. She was a former dean at Stanford University, and she talks about how what a lot of students coming in as freshmen lacked was, for example, job experience or just self-reliance. And so her talk really goes in depth about what helicopter parenting is and what we should be doing instead. I really recommend it. I think often when we talk about homeschooling or education in general, we're looking for the solution when we should be looking for ways to customize learning for individual children's needs. So, for example, people discover self-directed education and think that you should never try to teach a child anything, or they discover project-based learning and think we should only teach children through doing projects, or they discover inquiry-based learning and think that's the way for all kids. But in reality, children are very different and they need different approaches to teach them different subjects. So my personal feeling is that parent-curated education and community-curated education. So what happens is people discover self-directed education or unschooling, and they think the best approach is not to teach a child anything or ever encourage them to learn how to read or to learn math. Or they discover project-based learning and think every child should be learning through doing projects. And in fact, all of these are good approaches, but they work differently for different children at different times with different subjects. So trying to find a cure-all approach is not the way, in my opinion. And that is precisely why I like homeschooling, because it's a medium in which we can find different strategies for different students, for different families at different times and different stages of their development, instead of trying to find a one-size-fits-all solution for all people for all time. Homeschooling looks very different for very different families, but it seems to me that it works best when people are really open to experimenting and trying new things, and also excited about finding resources and learning ways to support their children at the same time. In general, it works better overall because people are naturally more oriented and free to individualize learning to fit their children, and they want their children to be happy in learning. Children's rights. Do you think that every child deserves an education? And if we narrow that down to fundamentals, basic literacy and numeracy, and if a child doesn't know how to write by, let's say, age 11 or 12, should society intervene and ensure that child gets an education? And the reason I say 11 or 12 is because I have observed, and some research does support, that many children are not developmentally ready to learn to read until they reach the age of 10.